codes, it Code for a Healthy Earth offers a foundational framework for whole systems health and healing to support citizens working together across ideological, cultural, and religious boundaries to bring about rapid system transformation and radical social and ecological um, change. So that's what everybody is talking about doing, want to do, but there's not a framework. So we could speak one common language, and the codes give us that foundational framework. Not only does it give us that foundational framework, it gives us values, it gives us vision of how we should behave, or how we should act, we should treat one another. And something else that I just could talk about all day about this is that it's about the earth. It's about all the inhabitants on the earth. When you look at all the independent initiatives and efforts around the world to try to change things, they're so fragmented and they're looking at it's partialized. We want to get rid of racism. We want to get rid of income inequality. We want to just improve the agriculture here. We want to do it, but it's all so fragmented and nobody's dealing with the whole. All the inhabitants deal with the whole. When you look at all the independent initiatives and efforts around the world to try to change things, they're so fragmented and they're looking at it's partialized. We want to get rid of racism. We want to get rid of myself again. We want to just improve the agriculture. Oh, am I still live? I heard myself I heard my own voice.
No, you're fine now. I think there was an echo through BJ, but she turned her.
Okay, so audio. What the codes do is take all these groups, initiatives, and ideas, and everybody who's fighting to try to end speciesism, racism, ageism, patriarchy, these hierarchical structures, and say, here is a framework that we could do it in that we all benefit from it, that the whole earth and all inhabitants on the earth. One of the first codes, and I share this with people all the time, and I kid you not, I don't care what their philosophical or economic background is, or what their belief system is, or their social and economic status, or what color they are. When I share this one principle of the code, aspire to do no harm, and align all of our thoughts, our words, and action with that which is nourishing for the entire community of life. I have not gotten anybody to say, that don't sound right. Everybody jumps on it. They jump on it. They love it. I don't care what their religious persuasion is, their political belief. Everyone likes it. And that's the beauty about the code. It has a language of life. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, I could go on and on, but I have a question I'd like to ask you, Shelley. Can I pose something to you?
Please, yeah.
Okay. One of the things you said the immense challenges requires urgent, unified, citizen-led action, leading to a visionary and compelling alternative, healthy model of governance. As with any serious disease, the severe human and environmental challenges we face require urgent, comprehensive, and uncompromising healing, attention, and care. Why do you say it requires urgent, comprehensive, and uncompromising healthy attention and care?
Well, first of all, thanks so much, Melvin, for that beautiful introduction to the codes and for really picking up on one of the deepest intentions of myself and Jan, which was to offer something that could be a unifying framework that creates consensus because it is so aligned with our common sense and with our deepest intention. And our current language is so far away from that it took a lot of sifting to really bring together many years of research and layers of sifting to come together with something that just got back to that language of life that everybody can feel included in, and not only everybody, but all of life. So when you ask the question about urgent and uncompromising attention, healing attention, I think it's quite clear that we're in this spiral of trauma, this vortex that is basically can be seen and is, as far as I'm concerned, a disconnect from the principles of life, which is causing imbalance in the system, a stress on the system, and that it is disease in the system. It's a fragmenting virus, I would say, that all of our disconnects and our lies and our forgetting and our structure that are disconnecting us from the language of life are creating a virus in the system which is splitting us from each other, from all of life. And this is a symptom of disease, the stress on the system, that we're overstressing the system. And the urgency, I think, can't be more clear. As we just move forward without paying that uncompromising healing attention, we're just seeing the escalation. We're seeing it in COVID, we're seeing it in the fires, we're seeing it in the species extinction. We're seeing it in every aspect of our life, from the personal trauma and to the collective. And so we need a language of life and a language of whole system healing to be able to address it. If we're ill, we don't go to a politician or an accountant. We'll go to a healer. And hopefully it'll be a holistic healer that will know how to integrate modern medicine with ancient wisdom and really look at the culture that is creating that disease. So here we are in this incredible situation where we're learning about our interconnectedness. And we're learning that local problems are not just local. Local problems are a symptom of a collective underlying root disease. And so one of the main challenges, I think, is to let go of this concept of compromise, because I think really it's compromise that is compromising the system. We're in this idealization of the concept of compromise. I'll get a little bit of this, you'll get a little bit of this, and in the end, nobody's happy, and especially not those aspects of life that are bartered in that process of creating compromise. And life doesn't compromise. The language of life doesn't compromise. We say, oh, well, a little bit of exploitation. It's not that bad because it's just a tiny bit, right? But it's that vibration of exploitation that then begins to infiltrate the system. So the way I see it is that we really need to let go of this language of compromise, this language that is disconnected from life, and move towards something that honors the wisdom of nourishment in the system. Life knows how to nourish. The language of life is one of nourishment. It's around needs and resources for all parts of the whole. And it's not about false equality. Not all parts get the same thing. They get specifically what they need, uncompromisingly. It's like, can you imagine saying to the body, okay, well, the information that goes, it's a little bit of, the heart can have a little bit of this and the stomach a little bit of that, but it's not exactly what they need. The body knows how to translate the information that each part needs precisely. And when there's stress on the system, that's where we begin to do the vortex of trauma and go into chronic disease. So that's why it's uncompromising. I really would love to see us take the concept of compromise and remember that actually in compromise, nobody wins. And when we move beyond compromise, we actually move to a different language, because it's not about, okay, a little bit, we'll sort of do it. It's about how do we make sure that everything has precisely what it needs in order to manifest its unique potential in service of the whole. And that's not impossible. That's the way nature works. And if we learn from nature, then we can actually learn how to replicate that in our own lives. So that's the precision, the uncompromising healing precision, where with this whole system approach, where we realign with those principles of precise mutual nourishment and the precise information that goes to all parts of the system according to needs and unique potential in service of the system.
Could you, thank you. Could you speak to, give examples of the language of life? You mentioned the language of life, and then speak to whole systems, whole system health and healing in the Vitality Code.
Mm. So the language of life for me, you know, I haven't studied science and I haven't studied as most people do, but I think the language of a life is available to all of us when we use our intuition because we are life. And so it's really basic common sense. You know what you need in order to be healthy. You know that in order to be healthy, you need natural, uncontaminated water. You need pure air, clean air. You know that you need healthy soil, vitalizing food. You know that you need safety from harm. You know that you need comfortable shelter. And you know that you need precise conditions that answer your needs to bring your gifts to the world. That's, if I simplify the language of life, for me, that's what it does. It ensures, it works with these foundations of life, offers them with incredible intelligence through the climate, through that regulating function of the climate to all parts of life so that there's the replenishing cycle. But it gives everything, life gives every part of it something completely different. The equality is that every part of life is able to receive what it needs, but those needs are different. Other than those foundational needs where we all need, for instance, pure, natural, uncontaminated water. And if there's compromise in the water, or if there's compromise in the air, there'll be compromise in our health. And because these are the foundations of life, when we compromise the water, it has a cascade effect in all aspects of life. You know, you compromise water, and so everything beyond that, our senses are undermined, our thoughts are undermined, our health is undermined, our systems are stressed. People have to walk for, long, for hours to get water. People own water. So this is going against the language and the law of water. Water gives without privilege or prejudice, as does air, as does the fire of the sun, to all. But we need to really learn to honor it. So for me, that's part of the language of life, which I listen into in terms of really understanding how do we begin to govern ourselves as a species. So the governance piece comes to say, okay, so this language of governance that we've created feels so disconnected from exactly what I've shared. In fact, it works almost opposite that. It privileges a few. It's a language of domination. It's a language of win-lose. Even in this idealized democracy, fundamentally, someone wins and someone loses. It's a language of privilege, structured inequality. For instance, democracy doesn't really, it gives so-called humans a voice. It gives them a voice once every 4 years. It gives some people a voice and others not a voice. And it doesn't give all the other stakeholders in our decision-making a voice. It doesn't give the trees or the animals or the water a voice. So when we think of governance, and, to me, I always start with what is the purpose of governance? And because I think no one really even questions that very much. We have these governments and we kind of understand that they're there to create some kind of an order. But the question is, what kind of order? And so when I think of the language of life and the language of governance, to me, the only legitimate purpose of governance is to protect and cultivate the health and vitality of the planet and all its inhabitants for generations to come. And if we work with that purpose, everything changes. So the first discussion that I think as citizens of the world we need to have in the face of this impending catastrophe, this current catastrophe, is to say, what is the purpose of governance? And then we have to say the next step is the language of life works as an interconnected living system. We're learning that. COVID has helped more and more people understand that we're all connected. The The waters don't have boundaries. The air doesn't have boundaries. Pollution doesn't have boundaries. We don't have boundaries. So how do we actually understand that as an interconnected living organism, what I do locally has global impact? And then the concept of how we govern ourselves shifts completely, because it's not about how we only govern ourselves within country delineated lines that are artificially constructed and that have no relevance to the bioregional ecological communication between different parts of the whole. So the planet organizes itself as this interconnected living system, and we're cutting it up into pieces and more pieces and more pieces and trying to make local decisions for self-benefit without realizing or taking responsibility for its impact. So when I ask myself these questions, I was saying, so what does this mean for how to transform how we govern ourselves as a species? Where did we go wrong and how do we rectify that? And in some ways, I came to a relatively simple answer, which is the vitality code. It's if our role is to protect and cultivate life for future generations, life works, it's all about information processing. It's all about how energy, it's all about the management of energy in a way. How do we ensure that the most nourishing information gets most effectively to all parts of the whole? And for that, you need a healing map. You need to understand what needs to go where. Now, we're so busy thinking about where our money needs to go, or what car to buy, or what television to buy, that we're not thinking about real needs. We're conditioned to think about fabricated needs. But when you go back to real needs and you say, okay, our first challenge, if we're going to heal the world, is to say, how do we ensure that all humans and animals have access to natural uncontaminated water? Because without natural uncontaminated water, we don't have healthy food. If we don't have healthy food, we don't have healthy bodies or minds. So let's start at the foundations. And in fact, one of the first initiatives of Codes for a Healthy Earth is to initiate a world water law, which says, let we as citizens come together across the world to say we have to think as a whole and see how to best protect and restore our watersheds, our water sources. How do we as a whole see the relationship between our watersheds and the entire water cycle? And how do we restore, in fact, the water cycle? Because it's not enough to restore the watersheds. The rain depends on the ocean. The rain depends on the forests. So we have to restore everything. When you start working with water, you see that it's connected to every other aspect. And when we start with water, it actually has an immense healing impact on every other part. So it's not you start with water at the expense of anything else. When we start with water, we benefit all of life. So these are some of the governance pieces that are evolving that just make total sense to that part of us that remembers how to manage a healthy village or a healthy global village. This is how you make sure that all parts. The other part of the World Water Law, which is a very important part, is to ensure that all animals and humans have access to natural, uncontaminated water. And so that, when we do that, we start thinking differently. We start measuring different things. We start putting our attention in different ways. That is a kind of an organizing principle for the whole economy, for education, for everything else to organize around. So that's the idea of how governance and this language of life come together.
Thank you very much. I really, this is our first time. We've been knowing each other for a few years now, and this is the first time I've had this opportunity to communicate with you like this, and just listening to you, I'm deepening my understanding of the Vitality Code, whole systems, health and healing, and also the codes for a healthy earth. And the language of life, when you look at when you look at policies, anytime someone goes to buy a house, a car, or go to the hospital, the language that's in there is totally, absolutely, and unequivocally against life. It's all about how can this institution benefit, and if you don't follow the rules, we're going to hurt you, we're going to punish you. So all policy in this thing, what we call democracy, as you very well aptly pointed out in deconstructing democracy, is all language that's designed to benefit a privileged few. It's language of exploitation, domination, privilege. That's anti-life. What you're speaking to, the code for a healthy earth, the vitality goes, a language of life, like you were saying with the water, it's for everybody. That's the language of life. Air is for everybody. That's language of life. Uh, the language the language that's currently used in politics, in economics, is all language that's designed to strangle, to co-opt, to exploit life, resources, not life, but resources for a privileged few. In doing so, it destroys life. It destroys life. I'd like for you to share more of some of the codes, like the codes has for a healthy earth. I know it starts with nonviolence and stewardship. Can you go through? I know the codes. Perhaps people who are listening are not familiar with it, with the codes. Just kind of nonviolence and stewardship, and then harmony and diversity. Because one of the things that I love the code so much, because it even deal with laws, what type of laws do we want to have? It deal with enterprise. What type of enterprise do we have? It deal with leadership. How should leadership look? Can you kind of address those things?
Yeah, well, when, the codes, just a little bit about how they were created. It's built on many years of research of my own, and then with my partner, Jan Golding, we put it together. And we came up with this framework of how do we get, as you said at the beginning, how do we get citizens on the same page to really have a sense that a different way is possible, and that is integrative and has a healing map, knowing that it's not about changing one law here or one law there. It has to come as a package deal. We're in such a place right now that we don't have decades to transition to a new governing system. We have to understand, instead of this, what do we need? And this is an offering towards that. And once we had put this out, we shared it with quite a lot of people all over the world who gave feedback on it and put their piece of information in it. So it's a very integrative document, because we've tried to include the necessary perspectives, and it's open to evolution. But one of the things we did was to understand, we basically spoke about the first aspect which we need to do as citizens globally, is to restore the foundations of life, which are called earth, water, fire, air, earth, water, fire, air, climate, biodiversity, and the web of life. We have to restore right relationship with these. And then we need to make sure that all humans and animals have access to pure water, clean air, healthy soil, vitalizing food, shelter, freedom from harm, safety from any harm, emotional or physical, and the conditions needed to thrive. So those are the pieces that we need to focus on in organizing towards. Then we also spoke about different aspects such as nonviolence and stewardship. So what does that look like, for instance? One of them is to aspire to do no harm. I'm not going to read it all through because it's a bit longer, but it's about protecting and restoring the foundations of life. It's about protecting and honoring indigenous peoples and working with their council. It's about, and this is an important piece, it's about ensuring that all decisions are based on the analysis of consequences to the health of the whole for the next 7 generations, and that human and non-human stakeholders are represented and taken into account. So this is a vital piece in the whole thing, because when we look at consequences to the health of the whole as a key discerning parameter for all decisions, everything changes.
Shelley, would you mind repeating that last when you said ensure that all decisions, because that is so important.
So this is really inspired by Native American tradition and other indigenous traditions who also speak of living, of cultivating life for the next 7 generations. Because when we start thinking we start thinking forward, everything also changes to our decisions. So this one is ensure all decisions are based on the analysis of consequences to the health of the whole for the next 7 generations, and that human and non-human stakeholders are represented and taken into account. You can imagine how that one phrase, that one principle changes everything. I'll share one, so I'll just go through the rest of it, or maybe I'll share one more around economy and law, another simple principle, which is so self-obvious in a way. Economy and law give legitimacy to those laws that protect and regenerate life, and delegitimize all laws that permit harm to life. We're living with a legal system that is colluding with and has been bought by those that are actually exploiting life. And so the laws that we're living by are absurd, dangerous, and grotesque in a way. And we're somehow colluding with it by saying, well, that's the law. We have to collude with a law that goes against life, which is totally suicidal. So when we start to understand that these laws are not, they're not a given, they were created and they can be dissolved as we evolve. And as we realize that we have been colluding with a system that legitimizes our self-destruction. So that one law, yes, what we have to re-examine all our laws, the foundation of the justice system, with a simple principle. Legitimize all laws that nourish life and delegitimize all those that harm life or are likely to harm life. One of the things of the legal system, which is absurd, the manipulations, is to say, well, we haven't proved that 5G is dangerous yet. So until we prove it's dangerous, then, we'll let it happen. But this potential of harm, this real dedication to the health of the whole and to the next 7 generations, it doesn't make sense to allow these experiments on humanity or animals or Mother Earth until we are figuring out what real science is. Which takes me to the concept of what science is. There's so much idealization of science, blind idealization, that there's very little discernment between what is the motivation for the science and how is that science conducted. So science, I think one of the principles here is align science and technology with these principles of life, so that there is no legitimacy for science to pursue knowledge at the expense of life or at the harm of life, at the experimentation of humans or animals or Mother Earth. Science for the pursuit of knowledge, or the science that is invested in by corporate interests, must, it's another thing that needs to be eliminated, and we need to go back to understanding that a real science is the science that, like governance, serves life. Otherwise, it has no legitimacy. Melvin, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Okay, on the law and economy, because one of the concerns of a lot of people going forward is investment. Could you speak to that one on the law and economy about investments?
Yeah, it's again so simple. It says invest only in that which protects and regenerates life. Disinvest from any and all enterprises that harm or could harm life. The idea that people are putting resources, investing, speculating on resources in ways that go against life is once again suicidal and grotesque. So that investment, because life does not invest in something that goes against life. It creates an immune system to protect against something that goes against life. So just the simple principle of only legitimizing investment in that which is, and it's not only that which is nourishing to life, it's also investing in the most efficient ways for that which is most beneficial for the whole. I mean, if you're thinking about investment, you see we've begun to think of profit as something that is personal profit. This doesn't really, personal profit at the expense of the whole, which ultimately is a bizarre concept, because if we undermine that which feeds us, hello?
Actually, it's
We
very
can hear
beautiful.
you, Shelley.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we invest in something that goes against life, it's kind of taking our energy in fragmenting ways again. It's taking our energy in disease-oriented ways. It's not taking energy in ways like life does to amplify the vitality. And so our efficiency, life is incredibly efficient, and we are incredibly wasteful. If you look at how we work with energy, it's probably the most wasteful and destructive use of energy possible. So how do we use energy efficiently for life? And those questions really stimulate the answers. So it's not about giving answers beyond this. It's not about any one person giving the answers. It's much more about these principles activating global conversations about what are the best solutions, the best potentials, the best possibilities for doing this. It's the wisdom is in the field. And so these are just the guiding principles, but now the process is to activate and invite the field to get in, to co-discover and co-create how to best do the transition to a world where we can we can govern ourselves as a healthy species for a healthy planet, like other species know how to do already. Melvin, you're on mute?
Yes, he has.
Thank you, Shelley. I often share with people that in modern day societies around the world, for most inventions, scientific endeavors, education, it's all about how can I make a profit from it? If I can't make a profit from it, I'll just destroy it. I'll leave it on the shelf. Most humans, sadly, who are really who haven't thought outside their conditioning, how they were raised, look at investment as personal gain. Boy, I could come up with this here idea, I can invent this here, and I can make a lot of money from it, not giving any thought to the whole system. Not giving any thought to the whole system. One of the things that you pointed out in one of your you said the bee with this amazing pollinating ability don't hoard its talent and say, this is just mine. It gives it to the world. So, the language of life is that which is healing, that which is healthy, and that which is promotes the regeneration of life. you know, when we speak of language, we often think of words, but language is more than words. It is communication on a level that most people are not even aware of. But animals communicate. They don't have verbs and adjectives and nouns and pronouns. Nature communicates. And us humans who are so human centric, we think the only way to communicate is with nouns and verbs and adjectives and pronouns and with the language of life. And that's what you're speaking to. And I really appreciate you for your contributions. And I think it's very important, it's beyond important, that we use language of life. When you look at democracy, when you look at this whole thing that was developed here in the United States in 17, whatever, what they talking about, a democratic process, that whole thing was anti-life. It was anti-life because it was about separateness, domination, privilege, and exploitation of everyone and everything except for a small group of human beings. And investments, you know, this model of capitalism, it is totally, absolutely anti-life. You know, and again, it's why I embrace the code so much, because it gives us a language to speak, that is life about life, and that's compassionate, and it's sane. You know, you mentioned the word suicidal, and grotesque. And that's what these policies are. You know what, for you, when you look at, you know, most people, they say, well, Amazon is doing so great. Look what Amazon is doing. The money, the billions. This guy's a trillionaire now. Well, it's grotesque and suicidal what's happening to the world. And what the codes is about is trying to help us to speak with the language of life. I'd like for you to speak to also another part of the code. You know, I really like, it's called on an it's the part on the education, learning, and media, where you say identify and develop and scale holistic healing. Can you speak to that?
Okay, thank you. Yes. So the principle here under education, learning, and media is to identify, develop, and scale holistic healing and regenerative learning opportunities for people of all ages, learning style, interests, and abilities, to support the flourishing of the individual, the community, and the whole. So basically, you know, learning is so important because we are a product of our conditioning, and the conditioning is so ingrained that we don't even realize how bad those internal programmings are of being inundated with the legitimization and even the idealization of all sorts of concepts of celebrity and privilege, and, as you say, you know, idealizing people like those people who use their talents to make the most personal benefit at the expense of the whole. There's a whole mechanism set up to promote this. Those that are in power are masters at creating illusions that their way is not only good, but it's, you want to be there, you want to follow. And so there's a deep unlearning process that we have to go through. The education system, the language we use, it's reductionist, it's archaic, and it's dangerous. And so in learning, we need a massive unlearning and relearning program. And the question is how to do that. And as we often say, you know, there are so many solutions that exist in the world. There's so much wisdom, there's so much knowledge, there's so many people on the fringes of society who, unlike those that are in the mainstream media the whole time, have really kept this ancient knowledge and evolved it and have the solutions ready for us to pick up today. Now it's a matter of shifting attention to them and giving them the space to bring their wisdom to the fore. It's the indigenous people, it's those people who are working with new forms of, ancient and new forms of agriculture, who really, with all the water solutions, with the new, all of these people that are holding this in sacredness, and they have answers, and we need to be able to see these challenges and solutions. For a system to heal itself, we need to be able to see, to map out what are the challenges, what are the solutions, how do we work together. So part of the evolving structure for eco-governance will be to create a global online communities where the solutionaries, where those who are invested in life can come together and really find each other and use all the technology that already exists today, rather than using it against life, to really see how to organize most effectively, because the technology exists as well. But it's a matter of saying, okay, let's take our attention from that media stream to this media stream and start to reclaim our authority and to offer with generosity the essential learning opportunities in every part of life, because it's not only children that needs to learn this. In many ways, it's the adults that really need to study the whole system concept of interconnectedness. So we all have a big upgrading to do. This was not and is not in the mainstream education system, systems thinking or healing or the language of life. It's the education system mimics the structures that fragment. We learn in separate knowledge areas rather than seeing how knowledge serves life. So bringing systems thinking, holistic thinking, the language of life to education through media, through education, through online technology, through mentoring, and really setting ourselves up to learn what we need to learn individually and collectively to take up our roles as citizens, because it depends on each and every one of us. So we need to support each other in that learning process. But I think humanity is at a place where we're really recognizing that we don't have the answers. Individually, we don't have the answers. They may lie in the field, but all of that sense of mastery in the face of, I can master life and I know the way and I can handle this, it's crumbling. We realize individually, I think we're feeling very helpless right now in the face of all of these crises. And so we have to relearn how to take our authority, to come back and say, well, we're not just relinquishing our authority to any leader or any, what we're doing is we're coming together to learn from and support each other with a full responsibility and authority that we need to make the change, because we can't rely on anyone else. So this, I feel, is the turning point that we're at. And with conferences like this, you can see how the vegan community is coming together, to really take this forward. Many different communities are coming forward to take their particular stewardship areas of life and bring it to the whole. And the more we do this, the more we'll find that we are aligned and that our gifts are complementary, and that we need each other.
I think if our hour about up, is our hour about up, or we have more time?
I think so. We're almost there.
I have one more question, and it's really close to me. As a person of color, and when you look at globally, probably, for the last probably 1,000 years or more, what we see is white domination of the world, white supremacy. When you look at indigenous countries of color, people of color, this generation historical trauma of white supremacy has impacted not only people of color, indigenous community, but also, and I hate to use this word white people, but I don't know any other word, but Caucasian European. It has also conditioned Europeans, Caucasian, white people, as it has conditioned people of color. Both sides is trauma, is trauma. The difference is that people of color acknowledge their trauma from this here generational uh, uh, generational white supremacy that's been going on for thousands of years, for hundreds of years, particularly. You know, when you look at Africa and Asia, the Latin America and everywhere, where um, Christianity and also Islam went in there and really changed indigenous cultures. A lot of people of color are, when you look at the intellectuals, some of the Pan-Africanists, how can, I believe in the codes, and I think it's a unifying thing, but a lot of the, some people of color, I shouldn't speak for them, it's my perception that the Pan-Africanists and other people of color who have Afrocentric perspective and value, they don't see the codes as a unifying thing. They see it as, oh, it don't say anything about white supremacy. It don't say anything about racism. Where I know the language of it, the codes, definitely, the whole codes, everything. I'm trying to find it. The word that I'm trying to get is not even eliminate. It addresses that. So how can, if someone is reading the codes, and this is the thing, and I was sharing with Shailesh, you know, I encouraged him to wear his flag, not his flag, but show something that he's showing his culture. So because it's subtle, but people of color, if they don't see language in there a lot saying that, okay, we intentionally attacking white supremacy and racism, they say, oh, that's just white people stuff. That's not for me, and I don't even want to read that shit. You know, I don't want to even look at it. So how can the codes, you know, how can we do that so that when and maybe I'm speaking for them, maybe this is my perception, maybe this is my bias, where a lot of people who are Afrocentric or Pan-Africanists, they won't embrace the codes. What can we do about that?
Melvin and Shelley, I hate to stop you there, but I think we need a second part of this discussion also. That's a very important question, Melvin. I know it needs to be addressed. Maybe if you have time, let's figure out a slot that we can get together again and continue the discussion. I also invite you today, because today is going to be just a summary of the rest of the week, or the rest of the 10 days. So we have summary of everything, you know. And so at 7:30 Eastern time today, which may be very hard for Shelley to be up at, there is a discussion about forgiveness, the vegan forgiveness pledge, and what we all need to be doing in order to move forward, knowing that historical grievances have been done, you know. So thank you all very much. I think because we need this time to transition to the next speaker. It's going to be a cooking demo of plant-based milks and plant-based drinks.